My name is Caleb Rowe. I'm 31 years old. I live alone in the small town of Parkwell, Indiana, a place where no one rushes, no one crowds, and everything happens so slowly that you can almost feel time passing by with the sound of leaves falling on the roof. Parkwell feels like it's been forgotten on the map of America. Ancient red maples stand guard along the roads. Wooden houses sit quietly under gray skies. And the people living in them, myself included, have learned to be silent, just like the world around us. I don't have a job that impresses anyone. I'm a dispatcher for a small logistics company. No fancy office. No urgent midnight emails. Just departure schedules, cargo lists, and a few phone calls from drivers asking for directions. To outsiders, that life might seem dull. But to me, it was peaceful. And peace was what I used to think I needed most. I live in the old wooden house my parents left behind when they moved to Texas to retire. When they left, I thought I would enjoy what people call absolute freedom. No one waiting for me to come home. No one asking what I wanted for dinner. No one sitting across from me at the table. And I did enjoy it, until that silence became an unfillable void. In the morning, I wake to the sound of the coffee machine instead of my mother calling from downstairs. At night, I turn on the TV like it's the last friend I have left in this house. I eat dinner alone, no one to talk to, no one to check in, just me, the table, and a soft yellow lamp, everything exactly in place. So exactly, it's frightening. I used to think I was fine, but then I started to realize I wasn't lonely because I lived alone, but because it had been so long since anyone had truly stepped into my life. And then the call came. It was an early autumn afternoon when the leaves had just started to change color and the wind made everything feel dry for a moment. The phone rang just as I set my coffee mug down on the table. It was Amanda, my cousin, 2 years older than me. Her voice cracked, as if she was trying to say something she herself couldn't believe. Caleb, he's gone. He really left us. I heard a child crying on the other end of the line, probably Ellie, her youngest daughter. Amanda had always been a strong woman, neat, proud. But in that moment, I heard something else. The sound of someone who had just lost everything she had fought to hold on to. 3 days later, her old SUV was parked on my front porch. Inside was Amanda, visibly thinner, eyes swollen and red. Beside her was Cody, 8 years old, always full of questions and clutching a box of Legos. And Ellie, 5, with soft blonde curls, hugging a well-worn stuffed rabbit. I didn't ask her what happened. I didn't need to know who was right or wrong. I just stepped down, opened the door, and said, "Come in. This is your home too." From that moment on, my house was no longer a quiet refuge. Mornings began with the sound of little feet running across the creaky wooden floors. The living room was filled with toys, milk stains on the sofa, dishes that never seemed to be done. Cody liked to talk to me about Mars, about robots. Ellie only fell asleep after I finished a bedtime story, most of which I made up. Amanda was different, quiet but resilient. She worked at a bookstore during the day. At night, she sorted through bills under the soft yellow light. No complaints, no venting. Only sometimes I'd catch her eyes shimmering like they were about to break, then returning to calm like nothing had happened. We lived like a nameless family. No labels, no definitions. But the longer we lived together, the more I realized that chaos wasn't a burden. It was a form of life. I once thought my heart had gone to sleep. But amidst the laughter of children, the clinking of dishes, and Amanda's sad gaze each evening, I realized I was coming back to life. Even though no one said it out loud, I knew. Something was changing. One night, while I was washing dishes, Ellie was singing softly in the bathtub, and Amanda stood leaning against the kitchen doorway and quietly said, "I feel guilty for disrupting your life." I just smiled without a second thought. You didn't disrupt anything. You brought life back here, and so did the kids. And so did you. Since Amanda and the kids arrived, the house began to find its own rhythm. A new rhythm of life. Chaotic, yet warm, exhausting, yet full. Every morning, I get up early, make coffee in the kitchen while it's still dark, then leave the house before the kids wake up. Amanda works the morning shift. On days when she works overtime, I swing by the daycare to pick up the kids, grab a few groceries, and head home. In the evenings, we divide the nameless tasks among us. I clean up the dishes, Cody does his homework at the dining table, and Ellie insists on hearing a story about the fairy who lives in a forest with a strange yellow lantern. A story I make up a little more of each night, since even I don't know how it ends. And Amanda, She's usually quiet. Not a cold kind of quiet, but the kind that comes from someone who has once hit rock bottom and is now just trying to stay afloat a little more each day. We didn't talk much, but her presence, silent and steady, became something familiar in this house. Like the sound of the dishwasher running each night, like the breath of something unnamed. I used to think I was used to loneliness. But ever since Amanda came into the house, I started to realize loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's when someone is there, but you're not allowed to get closer. She doesn't belong to me, and I don't belong to her. We lived in a closeness that had to keep its distance. Every time our hands accidentally touched while passing a glass, or when our eyes met in the kitchen late at night, we'd both look away quickly, as if afraid something might break if we lingered longer than 3 seconds. That silence wasn't normal. It carried something fragile, like a half-open door, like a light that never fully goes out. And then, Alina's appearance made me realize, sometimes a curious glance from the outside can reveal emotions you've tried hard to hide. Alina was a new employee in the customer service department, started around mid-March. Tall, slim, with long brown hair and eyes that left you unsure of what she was thinking. She didn't smile much, but whenever we talked, her gaze lingered just a little too long, as if she could see through the expressions I'd carefully practiced over the years. We weren't close, but in those brief encounters, I noticed she remembered I liked 2 sugars in my coffee, knew I often sat alone on the rooftop balcony, and sometimes dropped half-joking comments, like gentle taps on the shell I wore. One day, as I was sorting files, she walked over. "You cook? Or just order takeout when you live alone?" I laughed reflexively. I cook. Simple stuff, though not exactly living alone. I said it the way someone hides something not quite ready to share, but too real to deny, and only a few seconds later did I realize. I had just left a crack open. That evening, it was drizzling lightly. Amanda was on the night shift. Ellie had just spilled watercolor on the carpet, and Cody had plastered dinosaur stickers all over the wall. I, in an old t-shirt holding a cleaning rag, was trying to tidy up the mess when there was a knock at the door. 2 knocks. Light. Decisive. I opened the door. It was Alina. She stood there in a long coat, holding a brown paper bag of cookies. Her gaze wasn't exactly expectant, nor entirely casual. I was passing by, and for some reason, felt like dropping in. Might be a little weird. Before I could say anything, Ellie ran out from the inside, hands smeared with paint, shouting, "Uncle Caleb! I drew a flying unicorn!" Cody followed. "I just found a way to break the record in the game." Amanda came out from the kitchen, hair tied up, hands still covered in flour, calling out, "Caleb, don't forget the oven." I froze. Alina said nothing. She looked at me, then looked into the house, at the 3 unfamiliar people living with me like a family. Her eyes paused, not judgmental, but enough for me to understand. She wasn't prepared to step into this scene. "I thought you lived alone." A sentence as light as the breeze, but enough to choke off every explanation in my throat. "Sorry, I shouldn't have come. Looks like you have company." "No, wait. Alina, it's fine. Have a nice evening." She turned away, each step slow. Not angry, not rushed, but leaving behind no promises. The door I had unknowingly opened over the past few weeks closed without needing a sound. The next morning, she entered the office as usual, nodded at her coworkers, not a single glance in my direction, no subtle smile when passing the coffee machine, no more of her presence lingering in the spaces that once felt deliberately shared. I wanted to explain, but inside me, a clearer question echoed. Was what I feared losing really Alina, or was it the part of me that had just begun to realize I felt something, not right, but unavoidable? That day after Alina left, the house became unusually quiet. Not the usual kind of silence, but a kind of emptiness. As if an invisible door had just closed and everything that hadn't yet taken form dissolved into silence. Amanda didn't ask me anything. She quietly fetched a blanket for Ellie, folded Cody's clothes, then stood at the sink, her hands busy as they were every evening. But I knew she had heard the conversation at the door. She didn't look at me, but the distance between us in that small kitchen was longer than ever. I washed the dishes out of habit, but my hands trembled slightly. There was something in Alina's eyes, The way she turned and walked away, not angry, not hurt, just quiet. That made me feel like I had done something wrong, even if I couldn't say exactly what. I went upstairs later than usual. On the way past the living room, I saw Amanda sitting at the dining table, the light casting a glow on her cheek. She wasn't crying. She just sat there, hands clasped together, as if weighing something she herself couldn't define. I was going to keep walking, but then I stopped. "Are you okay?" I asked. Amanda looked up, slightly surprised. Then she nodded. "Okay." One short word, as always. I nodded, about to walk away, when she added softly, "That woman, is she someone important to you?" I stayed silent for a few seconds. "I'm not sure. Maybe." She was. Amanda nodded, her gaze retreating like a thin curtain being drawn. But I noticed. In her eyes, there was something that wasn't entirely calm. That night, I lay awake for a long time. In the dark, the house filled with familiar sounds. The creaking of wood, the steady breathing of children through the wall, and footsteps, light as a whisper, in the hallway. Not loud, but unmistakable. I opened my eyes. The door to my room was still closed. No one was there. But I knew something was starting to change, not outside, but within me. The next day, it rained. The first spring rain, just enough to soak the roof tiles and soften the tension between Amanda and me. I came home early. Amanda had just picked up the kids. Ellie was dozing on her shoulder. Cody sat on the floor with his usual pile of Legos. I helped her lay the little girl down on the sofa and brought her a cup of hot tea. We sat next to each other, saying nothing. The sound of rain outside blurred everything inside the house, as if we were slowly sinking into a fog without words. I glanced at her. Her eyes were still, her hands wrapped around the teacup as if seeking warmth. "Have you ever fallen in love again?" I asked, my voice so quiet I wasn't sure I really wanted to hear the answer. Amanda looked straight out the window, and after a long pause, she replied, "I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe. I'm just scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I fall for someone again, I'll become a burden." I didn't respond. But inside me, a clear thought echoed. And I'm afraid that if I fall for someone, it will be someone I'm not allowed to love. We sat there in silence for a long time. Then Cody called from the living room. Ellie woke up asking for milk. Everything returned to its usual rhythm. Dishes, laughter, a few small exchanges between two adults. But that night, after I turned off the lights and got ready for bed, there was a soft knock on my door. 3 knocks, slow, very gentle. I stepped out and saw Amanda standing there. The hallway light blurred her face into the darkness. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just looked at each other. And in that gaze was everything we had never named. That night we stood facing each other under the dim hallway light, neither of us saying a word. She wore a thin ash-gray sweater, her hair falling softly, her face blurred by the light in the doorway, and I almost forgot to breathe. No explanation, no invitation. She simply said, "The fuse in my room blew. I don't dare fix it. Can I sleep here for the night?" I nodded. A nod that felt almost unconscious, not because she needed help, but because I needed a reason not to close the door that was still open. I laid out the blanket on the bed. Got an extra pillow. She sat on the edge of the mattress quiet, as if even the slightest noise could break the fragile balance we'd both held for months. "Thank you," she said, then lay on her side, facing the wall. I lay on the other side of the bed, just far enough to feel distant, but close enough to sense the warmth spreading through the thin layers of fabric. We both stayed silent, but neither of us slept. Outside, the rain kept falling, and inside me, another storm was growing. I turned to look at her back. Her small shoulders rose and fell gently. Sometimes I wonder, how is it possible to feel closest to the one person you shouldn't feel anything for? I didn't know if she was awake. But I knew. If I reached out now, all the boundaries would dissolve. All the justifications would no longer hold. And because of that, I did nothing. I turned my face away, clenched my jaw, and told myself, just one more step. But I'm not allowed to take it. The next morning, when I woke up, she was gone. She left no note, no trace, except for the pillow that still held her warmth, and a soft indent where she had lain. I walked downstairs and saw her cooking breakfast for the kids as usual, her face unchanged, no confusion, no avoidance. But there was one difference. She didn't meet my eyes. All that day, There was a strange silence between us. Not distant, but the kind that comes from understanding each other too well to need words. That evening, after Ellie had fallen asleep and Cody was reading comics, I stepped out onto the back porch and leaned against the railing. Amanda followed, standing beside me, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. She was the first to break the silence. "Are you mad at me?" I looked over, shook my head. "No, but if you're asking that, it means there's something you're holding back." She pressed her lips together, her eyes gazing far away. "I know what I'm feeling is wrong, but sometimes feelings don't wait for the right moment. They just come. And if we turn them away, we spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have happened if we let them be." I answered, almost whispering, "But if we let them be, we might never find a way back." We looked at each other. This time our eyes didn't flinch, didn't hide. Just a direct gaze, soft, but heavy with weight. I stepped one step closer. She didn't move away. I was about to say something, but she spoke first. "We've come too close. If we take one more step, there's no turning back." I nodded. And for a split second, I thought I'd say, "Then let's not go back." But I didn't. Because both of us knew well. Feelings can be honest, but choices must be made with clarity. After that night, everything continued as usual. Breakfast, school, work, dinner, storybooks, toys, idle conversations. But one thing had changed. We didn't cross the line. But we stood right in front of it, close enough to see clearly and just clear-headed enough not to close our eyes. April arrived with heavy rains and early cherry blossoms blooming along Parkwell's main street. But inside my home, the air still felt stuck in a season without a name. Amanda and I lived like two rivers running parallel, close enough to hear each other breathe, but never touching. On the surface, everything appeared calm. Morning school drop-offs, afternoon pickups, evening chores shared between us, and weekend outings with the kids to the park. To anyone looking in, this was a proper family. Only she and I knew. Behind that peaceful shell were sleepless nights, deliberately avoided touches, and gazes that paused for just 1 second before turning away. There were moments that seemed ordinary, yet made my heart tighten. One time, Amanda gently removed a dry leaf caught in my hair without saying a word. One night, when I had a coughing fit, she silently placed a cup of ginger tea by my bedside. One early morning, I saw her sitting on the porch, eyes fixed on the rain, her face strained like she was holding something back that was threatening to pour out from within. I knew feelings were growing, not through words, but through silence. Not like fire, but like water slowly seeping through cracks in stone. And then, everything changed. That day was a Saturday. Ellie had a high fever, her body burning up. Amanda panicked, and I rushed to drive her to the clinic. After hours of IV fluids and tests, the doctor said it wasn't serious. Just a throat infection and a cold. But the way we both sat breathless in the waiting room, her hand clutching mine until it turned white, felt like a wake-up call. When Ellie was moved to a recovery room, Amanda collapsed into my shoulder and let out a long breath. If anything had happened to her, I don't know how I would have survived. I pulled her into my arms, our first embrace, not entirely out of love, but out of fear. And in that embrace, something broke open that I could never put back. That evening, after bringing Ellie home and tucking Cody in, Amanda and I sat together in the kitchen. Rain poured outside the porch. Just like the night she first arrived. We didn't drink wine, no candles, just a pot of cooled tea and two adults unsure what to do with the feelings they were carrying. Amanda was the one to speak first. "I have to find a new place." I looked up, my heart stopping. "I can't stay here forever, not because you're not good to us, but because I don't know if we can keep holding on to what we're trying so hard to hold." I froze. "So, you want to leave?" "Not because I want to, because I need to." She said it like she'd repeated that sentence in her head 100 times. Her eyes were red, but her hands stayed wrapped around the teacup, as if letting go would make her cry. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask her to stay, because I understood, when a relationship must be constantly restrained to avoid happening, then it's either wrong or simply not the right time. A few weeks later, Amanda moved out. A small apartment, 10 minutes drive from me. I helped her unpack, set up the bed, arrange Cody and Ellie's toys, rebuild their routines in a new space. We didn't hug. We didn't say goodbye. We just looked at each other, quietly, as if we both understood. What happened between us, even if unnamed, would live within us for a long time. That night, for the first time in many months, it was just me in the house again. The sofa was clean, the dining table had no milk stains, the dishwasher wasn't running. And in that seemingly peaceful air, I realized I had returned to the starting point. Once again, I was living alone. But unlike before, this time I wasn't lonely because no one had entered my life. I was lonely because someone had, and I had to let them go. Summer came and went like a passing breeze. My house slowly grew used to the quiet again. I woke up early, made coffee, had breakfast alone, left the house before the sun got too hot. No more sound of children's feet thundering across the floor. No more scent of baked goods drifting from the kitchen. No more quiet gaze watching me from behind a doorframe. And yet, strangely, I didn't feel empty like before. I had once lived in silence because no one had ever stepped into my life. But now I lived in silence knowing someone had, and they had left behind a space that was now filled with memory. Amanda and I still kept in touch. Not often. Not deliberately, just short, simple messages. Cody lost a baby tooth today. Ellie just finished reading all the fairy tales you used to tell. It's cold today. Don't forget your jacket. Words of care, as if nothing had ever happened. But we both knew that something very real had happened, even if it had never been named. One autumn afternoon, I stopped by Amanda's new apartment to return a toy Cody had forgotten. She opened the door. Still the same old olive sweater, her hair tied loosely at the nape, and that gentle smile, like winter had never touched her life. We sat on the balcony, she brewed tea. I looked down at the little street scattered with red leaves. "Are you doing okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Okay. Everything is falling into place." I looked at her for a long moment, not because I wanted to hold on, but because I wanted to remember. A woman who had once lived in my home as if it were her own, a woman who had shared the most ordinary moments, and who once made me feel like I was no longer alone. "I used to think," I said, "if things had turned out differently, maybe you wouldn't have moved out. Maybe we—" Amanda cut me off, like not with sadness, but with a strange, calm certainty. "I used to think that too. But if things had turned out differently, you and I wouldn't be who we are now." I smiled, a real smile, with no regret, no expectation. We sat in silence for a while, then she placed her hand on my shoulder, so lightly I could barely feel it. But in that touch, I understood. This was the final farewell. To something that never began, but had already come so far. That night, I returned to my house, and for the first time, it didn't feel too big. It didn't feel too quiet. It was simply enough for someone who had once learned how to keep their distance, and now was learning how to cherish what had once arrived. I no longer waited for someone to walk through the door, but if one day someone knocks, I'll open it. Not because I'm lonely, but because now I know how to hold a boundary and still hold on to myself. Not every relationship has to become love. Not every love has to lead to an ending. There are people who simply arrive, touch the heart gently, leave behind a quiet stillness, a subtle imprint, and then go. And sometimes it's the ones who don't stay who teach us how to live more deeply with those who come after.